Did you just get yourself the DJI Mini 4K and you're completely lost? You have no idea how to make the most out of the drone and you're confused with all of the settings? This is the video for you. What's going on, guys? My name is Dan Davis and I'm the creative director here on DansTube.TV, which is Australia's #1 drone YouTube channel. And today I've got my 34 best tips and settings for the DJI Mini 4K. And I will break them down into different menus and I will let you know what tip we're up to as we're going through them. There will be timestamps in the video, so make sure to click down there, check out the timestamps, and also in the video description there will be timestamps for each tip and each menu that I mention. So make sure to revisit the video and go through them. It will make it a lot easier to figure out how to change your drone settings. So we're going to start out with the main menu. So it's not this menu that we're in right now. We want to go back, and this is what I refer to as the main menu. So it shows you the drone that's connected, and there's a few tiles and a few buttons that you can tap on. So for tip number 1, this is located in the profile section, and it is the device management. So if we go in here, we can see all the different drones that we've owned, and if we just tap on the DJI Mini 4K right here, it will bring up the flight distance and the flight time. Now this is really handy to know if you're about to sell the drone at some point later down the track, but it's also good to know how much time you've actually been using the drone for, how many flights and how much flight time. This is great when you're monitoring the batteries, just to make sure that there's no issues with motors or batteries. This gives you a rough idea of how much flight time you've had, and yeah, it can help you make that informed decision if you need to replace a battery or a motor or send it in for repair. Tip number 2 is the DJI Forum, and this is still in this profile section here. This is really handy actually because it's through the application. You don't have to worry about going into a different web browser or using a different device. You can literally come into here and you can figure out, based on products off to the side there, what errors you might be experiencing. So if you've noticed you're having any issues with the drone, you can come in here, you can put it into your products or in the DJI Mini 4K, and you can see what other people are struggling with. This is great to jump in and just either give your thoughts or just to read what other people are going through. And then you can also press the pencil or the plus and add your own discussion point so that people in the community can help you. Tip number 3 is Find My Drone. Now this can be located in a variety of different locations throughout the user interface, but this is one of the areas you can find it. So you just tap on Find My Drone and it will show you where you are right now, and it will also show you the last video that was captured on the drone. So really handy to know if you've lost it in a location. This will give you that last video to let you know maybe where you hit the tree or where you lost connection to it. Really handy to know. And then you can tap on the start flashing and beeping, and if you listen up, hopefully you can hear that. That's the drone beeping, and it's also flashing. So if it has hit into a tree or you've lost it somewhere, you can go through the video to give you a rough idea and then press the flashing and beeping to then hopefully locate it in your area. For tip number 4, this is the firmware auto download, and it's located in the settings menu here. You'll see the first thing you see is firmware update, and we've got firmware auto download. So you can enable that if you want it to auto download, if you don't want to have to manually do it. This is really handy. For me, I don't mind manually downloading it. It just kind of gives me the whole experience of downloading it, reading through the notes of what actually this update brings. But a lot of people don't care for that, so they might just want to auto download. So that's where you enable it through the settings. Tip number 5 is still in this settings menu here of the main menu, and it is the camera view. So if you tap on that, there's the option to auto enter camera view. By default, I believe it's off, but when enabled, this allows the drone to immediately go into the camera view. So it doesn't even take you to the main menu, it just goes straight into the camera view, or as I refer to it, the flight menu. So definitely enable this if you want to jump straight into capturing content without having to worry about pressing another button. This naturally goes on to my flight menu tips, and to access the flight menu, you just press Go Fly, and this is what I refer to as the flight menu. It's this interface here. It's the main interface you'll be using when you're actually flying the drone. And so for tip number 6, I've got the pre-flight checklist, and this can be located in the top left corner where it says takeoff permitted. It will give you different messages and warnings depending on what's going on. You can see for me it's saying normal, so everything's fine with the drone, but this is where you would actually see error messages, and it would let you know if there's any errors with satellites or motors or anything like that. It will pop up here. So really handy to come in and just tap on takeoff permitted, and it will give you a rough idea. It is located where it says takeoff permitted. It might give you different prompts there. It might come up with a red banner to let you know that there's an error. So you can tap on that, to break down the whole run list of issues. And you can also go in here to play around with the return to home altitude, the max altitude, and the max distance. Now for tip number 7, this is the map and find my drone feature. So like I said, the find my drone feature is available in a few different areas throughout the app. So in the bottom left corner of the flight menu, you can see that little map icon. If I tap on that, it will bring up a larger map. And then if I tap it again, it will prioritize the map and put the camera feed in the bottom left corner. So this is where you can see exactly where you're located. You can see the area. If you zoom right out, it will actually let you know where certain airports and aerodromes are in your area. So right now you can see we're in a safe area to fly. So this is really handy to know and just to jump in here. But then you can also tap on the find my drone in the bottom right, and it will do the same thing. It will bring up the last video that the drone captured to give you a rough idea of maybe where you lost it. And then it will also give you the option to start flashing and beeping. So really handy to know where these are, especially if you're in a pinch. You really need to know where everything is located, especially if you start getting stressed because you've lost the drone. You don't want to have to worry about like going online and searching it. You just want to know exactly where to access the Find My Drone feature and how to access the map as well. For tip number 8, this is the attitude indicator compass. Now we've already got the map up, as you can see in the bottom left corner. If we press the icon that kind of looks like a map in the bottom right of that window, it will take us to the compass. Now in the top left of the compass, you can adjust it so it's either based on the controller or it's based on the drone itself. So it depends what orientation you're looking for here. So you can see as I'm turning, that little icon's turning, and then if I press the other one, I'm turning and the icon's turning. So it depends what you want to go with here. But the thing that's really handy is if I pick up the drone right now, you won't be able to notice it because the gimbal does such a great job, but I'm leaning it left and right. And you'll see that little bar is leaning left and right. If I go forward, it will then adjust that. If I go back, lean back, it will adjust that. So this gives you a rough idea of how much wind the drone is trying to battle. So this can be really handy. If you're noticing that the gimbal's a little bit off, or you're noticing you're having some issues, you can literally, like I'm leaning right now, and you can see how much the drone would be leaning if there was that much wind. So this is really handy. It also gives you an indicator of where the home point is and where the controller is in relation to the drone. And again, really handy to have this if you need to point towards the drone. You'll see that I'm angling this way, so I'm in the direction of the drone, like which way the drone would be flying. And it actually gives me a green circle. So it lets me know when I'm facing the direction of the drone. Again, this can be really handy for safety. So you know which way you're facing to make sure that you're getting the best connection to the drone. And then obviously you've got the compass as well, and you know roughly how much wind is happening. So really handy to try to figure this one out and play around with it to see what works best for you. So for tip number 9, I'm just gonna have to turn it into the auto mode. So you're gonna see that I'm a little harder to see right now. But this is how it's going to look by default. You're going to be on the auto mode, and you're going to see storage, you're going to see resolution and FPS, and you're going to see EV. Now, storage is going to let you know if you're recording at 1080p 30 frames per second, you're getting 1 hour and 51 minutes of recording. Now, if I adjust this and go into 4K, you can see it immediately in real time lets us know we've got 39 minutes now of recording. So this is really handy to know. It gives you a rough idea. You can't tap on storage, but it just lets you know how much recording time you've got. And then if you click on resolution FPS, this is where you can adjust into 2.7K 60, 1080p up to 60, or if you want to go into 4K as well. Tip number 10 is located in the far bottom right corner, and by default it should be on auto, but if I tap on that, it's going to take me into the Pro mode. Now this is where you can really get the most out of the camera and really adjust the image. So you can see that it actually changes the interface in the bottom right corner. I can now tap on it and adjust ISO. I can adjust shutter. So you can see I've got full control now to adjust all of these. Really simple to just go through and adjust all of these on the fly, which is nice. Ooh, we'll go to 500. And then we can also go in here and adjust the auto white balance. So we can turn that off and then fully manually adjust white balance based on where we are. We can adjust resolution and frame rate here, frames per second. And then on top of that, we can see the SD card. So we can see how much storage is here. So the Pro mode just kind of opens it up to give you some more options, and well worth looking into if you want to get the most out of the camera. Tip number 11 is the digital zoom. Now this is an easy one to access. You can see where it says 1 times. If I tap on that, it's going to zoom in to 2 times, right? Because we're in 4K. If I now change into 1080p, for example, I can now go to 4 times. 4 times, which is cool. But the thing that's really cool is that you can press and hold on it. So if I literally press and hold on the 1x and then drag my finger down, I can then manually, like with a slider, adjust the different zoom points. You can get smoother zoom here, and it now tells you the equivalent. So at 2x it's 48mm equivalent, and at 4x it's a 96mm equivalent. So you can see, because it's digital zoom, it's not going between different lenses. You can get a relatively smooth zoom here, which can be pretty handy to get used to, or you can just tap on it to go between the different points. Keep in mind that 4K will be limited to 2x zoom. You can't go into 4x here, but you can still do the same thing where you press and hold and then drag it to go into the 48mm equivalent or the 2x zoom there. For tip number 12, I have to launch the drone, and this is the QuickShot mode. So the way you access it is tap just above the record button to bring up the photo, video, quick shots, and pano. And you can see if I tap on QuickShot, it won't enable it unless I launch the drone. So let me just quickly launch the drone. Oh, it is very windy today. Very, very windy. Okay, so here I am here. Because I've got enough satellites, I can just go straight into QuickShot mode, and it will come up straight away with that little plus around me. So I can tap on the plus to make sure that I'm the focus point for this tracking. So it kind of works like a tracking mode because it tracks a subject here. I can tap and adjust the distance as I see fit. And these are the different options. I can also press on the question mark, and this will give you a video to let you know like what actually is this mode. So we can go between droney, which is more of a zoom out, rocket, which is directly up looking down, circle, as the name suggests, circling something, helix, which is more of a whip around and then a revealing shot, which I really like helix. And then we've got boomerang as well, which is a whip around and a reveal again and then comes back in. So you've got a few different modes in here. You can see that you can make that smaller if you want to focus on the subject. So you can say, I just tap on myself there nice and easily. I can close it, or I can actually press and hold and drag on the screen. So a press and hold and drag. So literally press, I'll show you like press and hold and then drag down like this. So it's like a press and hold and a quick movement of a drag. So press and hold and then drag to create it yourself. Or like you can see, you can just go with that plus and tap on that to make it the focus point there. So really simple to do. Like I said, so there are a few different options in here. So if I go back to the droney and I draw around myself, for example, you can see I can adjust the distance down here, nice and simple. And you can also open it up and press the question mark just to see a video preview of what you can expect from each QuickShot mode. So moving on to tip number 13, I'm kind of condensing this one into a few, but in the top right corner, not the 3 dots, but on the left-hand side of the 3 dots, these are all little interactive icons that you can tap on. So if I tap on satellites, it will tell me how many satellites I've got, if the signal is strong or if it's weak or whatever it may be. So that's really handy to just tap on to give you a rough idea of what's going on. You can then tap on the RC, so that gives you the signal from the remote controller. Again, very handy at a glance information. You might not even need to tap on it. You can just look at it and go, okay, I've got 16 satellites and the remote controller signal is really strong here. So that's great to know. And then you can also tap on the battery. Now it doesn't let you know anything, so I actually have to launch it just to let you know. So let's launch it, pull it back and angle down the camera. So it just takes a little while to kind of populate it now that the drone is flying, but this does give you some great information once you're in the air. So now if I tap on the battery, it's going to give me some more information. So it's actually not telling me how long until return to home. Typically it would, obviously in a scenario when you're flying away, it's going to be able to populate this a bit more accurately, but it's telling me how long until a forced landing and how long until the battery is completely depleted, like until it's just going to fall out of the sky. So again, really handy to just tap on this and have a rough idea of the different points. Return to home is good to know because the drone will start returning to home. So you need to know roughly when it's going to return to home, and then it'll give you the other information as well, when it's going to force a landing and when it's going to deplete. Very windy today, so it's actually adjusting in real time and giving me some updated times as the drone is struggling with the wind. So again, really handy to know in the top right corner, all these little icons that you can tap on and what they let you know. A bonus tip for the flight menu is how you can actually adjust the camera movement with the touchscreen on your phone. All you got to do is press and hold in the middle and you'll feel it vibrate, and then you can drag your finger down and drag your finger up to adjust the camera movement with the touchscreen. You can't go left and right. Some drones you can, but on the Mini 4K it's only up and down. But this just gives you some touchscreen controls if you really want to go with that. Sometimes I find myself using it and it is hidden away. It's not something that's that obvious. So again, all you do, press and hold on the screen till you feel it vibrate and the little circle will come up, and then you drag down and up to adjust the camera. If you are interested in the DJI Mini 4K or any other DJI drone, camera, or accessory for that matter, then I will have some links down below to save on whatever it is you're looking for. So for my Australian viewers, I've helped you save over $70,000 on your drone, camera, and accessory purchases through the D1 store. So make sure to reach out to them, sales@d1store.com.au, mention DansTube to save through them, or you can also use the code DansTube on their website to save on most cameras, drones, and accessories. And if you are an international viewer, I will still have some links down below, so don't worry, there are links down there for everyone. We're now going to move on to the safety menu, and you access this through the 3 dots in the top right corner. Tap on that and it will take you through to the safety menu. Now for tip number 14, this is the flight protection area. You can see there's a little subheading that says flight protection. There's a few options here. So you can adjust the max altitude, which legally it needs to be 120 meters, but you can pull it down if you want. Like let's say, for example, you're practicing and you don't want to fly too high. You can limit it. You can almost create like a geo fence of how high you want the drone to fly, especially if you're letting someone fly it. Maybe you're in an open field like I am today. And you want someone to fly it, but you don't want them to fly it too far. You can limit their distance. You can limit the max altitude. And then for the auto return to home altitude, I would actually suggest bringing this up. You can see it was at 60 meters, but I would always suggest going to about 80 meters, right? Because that means that automatically when the drone starts to return to home, it's going to go up to 80 meters before it returns to home. And let's say, for example, that you're at a lower location when you start, when you launch the drone, and there's a lot of trees as it's inclining, then you could actually run into some issues if it's going to return to 60 meters from your takeoff point, and it might hit some trees or whatever it is, buildings in the area. So I do always suggest making that return to home altitude as high as possible. We've gone with 80 meters here, which is actually the max on the Mini 4K. And like I said, you can adjust the altitude and the distance, and you can also update the home point in this area here as long as the drone is in flight. And I just realized the reason that auto return to home altitude was capped is because of the max altitude I was at. So you can see now I can go up to 120 meters. So typically I'd recommend anywhere from 80 to 100 meters for the return to home altitude. We're still on the safety menu and we're moving on to tip number 15. And this is how you can calibrate the sensors. So as you scroll down, you'll see we've got compass, normal, and IMU, normal. Now it will let you know if there are errors there, and then all you have to do is tap on calibrate and it will walk you through the whole process. So that's the compass calibration. And if I tap on IMU, that's the IMU calibration. It will give you a diagram, it will give you a description, and then you press start. Nice and simple. But you can also come in here to see if there are any errors or any issues with the sensors. And again, through the pre-flight checklist, which is that where it says takeoff permitted, that's also where it's going to tell you if there's any errors with the sensors. Tip number 16 is the battery information. So if I tap on that, it will actually give you a rough idea if you've got any sort of damaged cells. So you can see that the voltage is equal. We've got 4.04 volts for the cells. If there's any huge variation there, that's where potentially there could be some damaged battery cells. You've got battery voltage, you've got the temperature, and you can also see how many cycles that battery has gone through. So this is really handy to know at a glance. If there's any sort of issues, especially battery temperature, that can be a big warning sign. And also if there's any discrepancy, if the cells are completely off, if one of those indicators is yellow and it's low and the other one's green and high, could let you know that there's some issues with the battery. Now for tip number 17, this is the payload mode. So if you scroll right down to the bottom, you'll see there's the advanced safety settings. There's a few options in here, but the one we're looking at is payload mode. So this mode should only be enabled when it's using accessories like propeller guards. Typically with a Mini 4K, you're probably not going to be carrying anything. There's not going to be a huge payload on it, but you might have something on it. Like propeller guards is the most obvious one that you're going to have on it. If you're like flying in a close quarters location, you know, flying in a house maybe that you've got permission to fly in, or maybe you're flying in a tight gap and you want to have some propeller guards on, you will get some warning messages, right? So if you don't enable that payload mode by going 3 dots in the safety menu, going right to the bottom, advanced safety settings, and then enabling the payload mode right at the bottom there. We're now moving on to the control menu, which is right next door to the safety menu. And so for tip number 18, we're going to scroll down and look at the gain and expo tuning. Now this is great to try to get your head around because this actually adjusts a lot of different settings in the sense of how the actual camera feels, how the drone feels. So you can adjust the aircraft, so the max angular velocity, the yaw smoothness. You can adjust those, which is great. You can also adjust the Expo, so the pitch roll, the yaw, and up and down settings. So that's all to do with the drone, right? You can adjust exactly how the drone feels when you're turning, when you're flying forward, you know, all sorts of things. It's great, and it actually breaks down exactly what it's going to do when you adjust those settings. And then as we go down to the gimbal, this is where we can actually adjust the control speed and the tilt smoothness. So right now, this is just the default as I'm using that little wheel there to look up and down. That's the speed that it goes at. But let's say, for example, the control speed is maxed, right? Now it's like, woo, real fast, right? Way too fast at that point, but that's how you can adjust it. And you can also adjust the smoothness. And now it's actually going to smooth out. So as I go and let go, you can see I can like scroll and let go, and it literally just has like a smooth effect of kind of calming down. So it's not as abrupt and as jumpy. It literally smooths it out, and you can play around with all of these, right? You can adjust it how you see fit, and you can always reset it down the bottom, and that's going to reset it back to its default. And you can adjust it for the cine mode, the normal mode, and the sports mode. So on the controller, you can actually go between these different modes. You can go to cine, you can go to normal, and you can go to sports mode. And again, you can adjust all of those parameters, all of those inputs individually for each mode. Tip number 19 is the FPV mode. So by default, it's in the follow mode. So let's just launch the drone again. So in follow mode, it's going to be nice and smooth, right? So as I'm flying left and right, it's keeping it nice and smooth, back and forth, nice and smooth. The footage looks cinematic, right? In the sense that it's smooth, it's not kind of jumpy or awkward. But straight when I enable the FPV mode, it gives us a slightly different effect. So it gives us a little bit of a, if I start to fly this way, for example, right, you can see that it's actually giving me a bit of an FPV look. So as I'm turning around, it's not smoothing out the camera. So the camera is actually moving as the drone's moving. And that gives it a very unique look, right? So you can see as I'm flying forward, I can like turn around and get a very unique FPV perspective here. So that can just add a little bit more to your footage. It can make it look a little bit more unique. And it's actually cool to see how the camera turns in FPV mode. Again, imagine yourself flying a lot faster. It's going to look very unique there. And then obviously we can just go back into follow mode. And now as I start flying around, it's just going to look smooth again. So nice and easy just to go between those modes. And FPV mode definitely adds a fun play, a fun twist to your drone flights. Back in the control mode, and for tip number 20, this is the upward gimbal rotation. So I've actually enabled it already purely to angle the camera for this video. But if I disable it, it will actually lock it at that point. So imagine if I left it like that for the whole video, it would look very awkward. So it locks it so it goes up to 0 degrees. So it's like perfectly in the middle there, but I can't go any higher, right? So I can go all the way down if I want, but I can't go any higher. It locks it out at 0 degrees. So if I enable upward gimbal rotation, then I can angle it all the way up to 20 degrees. And so that's what I've done for this video, just to put myself in the frame. But I would recommend enabling this because you can get some lower shots and look up slightly, and it does give it a unique perspective. Tip number 21 is the gimbal calibration. So as you go down, you will see gimbal calibration. You can also recenter the gimbal. So that's going to send it directly down, looking down, and then also send it back into the center again. But if I click on gimbal calibration, again, same thing. I can go in auto or manual mode. It will show you how to do this process. And this is how you can calibrate the gimbal if you've got any issues with the gimbal. So for tip number 22, this seems to be exclusive to iPhone or iOS devices. There's the option to enable phone charging. So when I enable that, I feel it vibrates and it starts charging. So now it's charging my phone from the controller battery. This is really handy, as you would imagine, because you are using your phone's battery to bring up that video feed and to fly the drone basically. So on Android, I believe it's automatically charging your phone, but on iOS, you have to enable it, and you have to enable it each flight. So if I now came back out tomorrow, it wouldn't be enabled. I'd have to come in here again and enable it. You can see I can disable it and my phone stops charging, and then re-enable it, and my phone is charging again. Nice and easy. Tip number 23 is the button customization, and this is one of my favorite ones. It actually means that you can adjust the FN button on the controller. So if I, by default, pressing it is going to recenter the gimbal, Pressing it again is going to send the gimbal back up. A double press is going to do the exact same thing because for some reason they're both the same feature. But if I tap on it, I can bring up some more options here. So for example, I can adjust the gimbal mode. If I want that to be an FPV option, I can literally press it once and it's going to put me into FPV mode, press it again back into follow mode. So that's an easy one. You can increase EV, decrease, you can go into the camera settings. So if I press it, it's going to take me across into the camera settings straight away, and you can come back in here again. So recenter gimbal is typically the one I go for the single press. If I go on the double press, you can see I've got a few other options here. So we might make it the camera settings. So that now means for me, I can press it once, it's going to recenter the gimbal, press it again, it's going to go back up, and a double press is going to bring up the camera menu. For tip number 24 in the control menu, this is how you repair to aircraft. So you can either just tap on that button that says repair to aircraft, or you can press and hold the power button on your controller and then press and hold the power button on the drone until you hear a very distinctive beeping sound, which is when it's in the pairing mode. But I can force it by pressing repair, it will start beeping, and then I can pick up the drone and I can press and hold the power button until we get another unique beep. There it is. And now it's going to start connecting, beep beep, and now it's connected, hopefully very soon. There we go. So this is really handy if you've got a few different drones and you've got to connect between them. It's also easy to do. So say you're in this menu and there's no go fly, it will actually say connection guide or something like that. So you can tap on it and then you can press into like camera view. So it'll bring you into this interface without the camera feed, and you can still press on the three dots. You can go across the control and you can go right down and repair to aircraft to force that process. We're now moving on to the camera menu, which is right next to the control menu. So if we tap on that, it will take us across to the camera menu. And so for tip number 25, this is the histogram. So you tap on that to enable it, and it will actually bring up a histogram that you can drag around on your screen. So this just lets you know exactly what's happening. It gives you a rough idea of if things are overexposed or underexposed. It's a bit of a weird day today, overcast and it's sunny. So you can see the clouds in the background are like overexposed. They're a little too white there. So if I just go into the auto mode, you'll see how the drone tries to account for it. So right now it's now made the background, the sky looks amazing, but now I'm really dark. So that's why I've had to go into the pro mode to make me more of a focus point here. But this is easy to see. And if you go into the auto mode while the histogram's on, it'll also show you how DJI have got it programmed to adjust the exposure basically. So that can be really handy to go into and learn how to expose the shot properly. And an extension of that is tip number 26, which is the overexposure warning. So if I tap on that and enable it, it now will let me know that everything behind me is overexposed. So if I press on auto, you'll now see it will adjust it. So we can still see the clouds are slightly overexposed and a few things behind me. But when I'm in that pro mode, you can see because I'm a bit of the focus, the background is completely overexposed. That's what they're saying here, but really handy when you're flying the drone. It can give you a rough idea of how you've exposed the shot. Tip number 27 is the grid lines. So I like to enable just the middle one, which is the rule of thirds. So you can see there's the little lines there to let you know what's in the rule of thirds there, what's in the frame. So let's just angle it down so you can see that. But you can enable all three. So you can enable that more diagonal one. So that would be more for FPV, as well as just to frame it slightly differently. And you can have the center point as well. So for me, that's a bit too much. I find that just having the rule of thirds, that grid line there, is just a little bit better for me. Tip number 28 is the frame guide. So it's just below the grid lines. I can tap on that and it gives you a bunch of options, right? So this is great to give you a guide if you want to use this content for socials. So for example, 9:16 is the vertical format if you were to be recording for socials, for some vertical content. So you can see it still records the whole thing. It actually is just purely a guide, but now it gives me the point, right? It's telling me like, this is the area right here. If I was to go 9:16 straight in the center, this is exactly where it would be. So this is great for a guide. And again, I can go with like 1x1, which is again, another social one. It's a square, and it just gives you a rough idea of like where that's going to be. So if you're finding yourself wanting to like repurpose content for socials, but you also want to record the whole thing, maybe you would go 9:16, so you would know roughly where the center of the frame is, but you also record the entire footage as well. Everything that's grayed out on the sides is still going to be recorded. Tip number 29 is the white balance. So by default, it's on auto, but if I press on manual, I then can adjust everything. And if I press and hold, it's actually going to take away the menu to show me what it's going to look like. And then straight when I let go, it's going to then bring the menu up. So you can press and hold and drag, and it will take away the menu, show you the footage. And then straight when you pull away, it's then going to focus in on the menu. So you can leave it on auto if you want, or you can go into manual and then just adjust it just a little bit more if you want to get a bit more out of the footage. Tip number 30 is just a little bit further down, and it is the SD card and how you can format. So you can see just above the storage, I can click on format, and then I can format the storage. For me, I've got some footage on there I want to keep, but that's how you format it through the menu, nice and simple. We're going to now move on to the transmission menu, which is next to the camera menu. Tip number 31 is how you can view the frequency and the channel. So as you scroll down, you will see that this is all the different channels, right? So it's in auto, so I can't do much with it in auto, but this is how you can view it. So the drone has to be grounded. You can't be flying to view this, but this will let me know all the interference and all the channels in the area. So if you're noticing that you're in an area where there's a lot of interference, you will notice a lot more of these spikes that we're noticing a bit further down on the graph. So really handy to just come in here and know what's going on. Tip number 32 is how you can change the frequency. So you can manually change this. If we just click on manual here, it will now give us the option of 2.4 gigahertz or 5.8 gigahertz. So as I pull it down, I can see this is the interference at 5.8. If I swap across to 2.4, this is the interference at 2.4. So you can see there's a bit more interference at 2.4. But what I can do here is I can press and hold on that rectangle and I can drag it. So I can manually choose a channel that might be a little less cluttered as such. So you can manually adjust it. I can go into 5.8 and do the exact same thing, drag it across. This is really handy to do if you're finding that nothing else is working, but in most scenarios, leaving it on auto and leaving it in dual band will be the best one to go with. Now we're moving on to the About menu. So if we tap across to the About menu, let's now go through the final 2 tips in the About menu. So for tip number 33, this is how you manually check for updates. So you can see straight away aircraft firmware. I can press that blue text to check for updates and it will check version. It's checking. Your firmware is up to date. But if there is an update, it will pop up with a prompt. And then as I come down, I can then drop down the fly safe data and I can do the same thing for the fly safe data. Check the version, check if there's anything going on, if there's any updates, and it will do the same thing. It will let me know if there's no updates, if it's up to date, or whether there's a brand new update ready to go. There we go. So your firmware is up to date. And then for tip number 34, the final tip for the DJI Mini 4K, if you scroll right down, you have a few options here. So you can either reset all of your settings. So that will take everything back to factory, everything back to default. So maybe you've been playing around with all these settings in this video and you've gone, oh, I can't remember what it was by default. You can literally press that and take everything back to default. And you can also press the clear data and it will clear everything. So that's handy if you want to sell the drone or if you just want to clear everything. Those 2 settings are nice and easy to jump into. All right, guys, so that is the end of my 34 must-know tips and settings for the DJI Mini 4K. I hope that this was helpful, and let me know if you've got any questions, any comments, let me know down there, and I will definitely help you out in the comment section, and I'll chat to you in the next one. Peace.